Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today is Coach Andrea and I with part 5 of the Photoshoot prep series. Today we're going to be talking about peak week and the actual photo shoot day. So really all the work that we've done up to this point kind of culminates in, again, this final week before the photo shoot. Peak week, we're really kind of optimizing, fine-tuning a few variables to get the absolute best result for the shoot. And then the actual day of the shoot and how do we kind of go about getting the absolute best result there. What does that actually look like, etc. But before we get into this, as a reminder, last week we talked through the last half of the diet, basically that point where people are going from lean to shredded, really where most people struggle and typically fail. So if you haven't listened to the rest of the series, I would definitely recommend going back. I would recommend, of course, starting at part 1. But especially like the last 2 episodes we recorded talking through the diet structure, how we set that up, and especially getting the best result out of the latter half of the diet, would highly recommend going back and listening to that. But before we get into the episode, it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded with Christmas break here. Andrea, anything new going on with you?
Yeah, I'm in my own deficit. I'm down like 4. I was down 4 pounds in 2 weeks. And that was, I had a vacation in there and then Christmas. This week, my weight jumped up like 2.5 pounds the first part of the week. And then it came down pretty quickly and I hit a new low this morning. So, it'll be interesting to see, especially if I keep trending down from here. I know that this is like a push right now. And so it'll be really interesting to see, Sunday when I check in, if my calories come down, because I know my average isn't going to be down. Even if I keep hitting new lows from now until Sunday, my average is at best going to stay the same, but it's probably going to be up. But I mean, there was the Christmas with my family. I definitely had way more flexible food and I had alcohol. And so I think that some of that spike up was definitely from that. And then it just took my digestion and then the ovulation, my weight always spikes too. And so there was kind of like a combination of factors there. But as of yesterday, I was like, oh wow, okay. My digestion's like, not digestion, but like my stomach feels back to normal. It's like, kind of like you don't even realize, but I couldn't like pull a vacuum in. And then all of a sudden yesterday I was like, okay, now I could pull a vacuum in. My stomach feels like emptier and flat again. And then I hit that new low this morning. So yeah, still making good progress, but next week, it'll be interesting to update and let everybody know if there was actually a calorie drop or not. 'Cause I don't know how aggressive yet she's going to be with those.
Yeah. I think that's really important to understand though. Whenever you're traveling, if you're flying, you're going to retain more water afterwards. If you've consumed alcohol, typically you'll be a little bit dehydrated the next day. Then the subsequent days, your body will kind of overcompensate that by retaining a little bit more water. And even if we're just eating more flexible foods and still truly are hitting our macros, typically that will skew our weight a bit. So it sounds like you're not too worried about scale being up a bit.
No, I'm not worried about it, especially because it came down so quickly. And I also know, even with how flexible I was with my food, I honestly wasn't that flexible in New York. I had 1 piece of pizza and I had 1 bagel, and the rest of the time it was like my normal tuna packets, carrots.
Oh damn! Like okay, so you weren't flexible.
Yeah,
you weren't very flexible at all. Okay.
No, but so whenever I got back, even with flying and everything, I was down a pound. But then after that family Christmas where I was flexible, like I had my protein, I still hit my macros, but it was very estimated. And so that's where I saw a much bigger difference, a much bigger reflection on the scale. And like you said, the next morning I was exactly the same, but I was probably dehydrated. And then the following morning is whenever I had jumped up a couple pounds.
There, it's always helpful for me to remind clients, hey, work through like how many calories would you actually had to have eaten to gain 2.5 pounds of body fat, right? If it takes 3,500 calorie surplus to gain a pound of body fat, let's say for your maintenance is 2,000. Did you eat like, what is that, over 10,000 calories yesterday? No? Okay, and then, right, we can probably assume that this is even if we were like slightly over our normal deficit calories, you were still probably below your maintenance intake, right? The needle still move forward just a little bit slower. But we just have to be patient and not take too much stock in that scale spike.
Yeah, I had that conversation a few times this week.
Yeah, as did I. Cool. Okay. Well, on my end, as of now, let's see, I think I talked about this last time we recorded, but again, we plan to get into some fat loss soon. So I'm actually going to start my diet on the 6th. So basically just taking the next couple of days off training, food is staying where it's at to kind of drop fatigue going into that. And then we are right out of the gate just dropping. I'm averaging 34 to 3,500 calories daily currently. And then we are dropping to 2,100 to 2,200. As of now, I like Steve. Steve and my work with him has always been pretty aggressive with fat loss, which I personally like. Both Steve and Brandon. And I think that's pretty similar it depends on the client, but like someone who's I know is a good candidate for it, I always prefer to just like get things done relatively quickly. So yeah, good drop right out of the gate here. As of now, we haven't adjusted anything cardio wise or anything of that sort. I'm still doing he did bump my steps up a little bit. So I was averaging like around 10 to 11K. We're bumping those up to 12K plus per day, which is pretty easy for me with the walking pad and whatnot. And then I'm just doing 2 cardio sessions per week still. But I imagine we'll kind of gauge the response and go from there. But I'm excited for it. I think that, again, he wants to pull off something like 10 to 15 pounds and just kind of see where we're at.
You said it's like 7 weeks, right?
Yeah, 7, 8 weeks. We're actually starting a week earlier than we were initially planning on. So I think we'll kind of have a little bit of buffer to see like, hey, how are we feeling? I think he's planning on it might even potentially be a little bit shorter. Just again, depending on where we're at. I'm not sure how like lean he necessarily wants me to get, but I don't know. I'm really curious to see what it's, because I don't feel like this, like I can still like see a good amount of quad separation and whatnot. I feel like my lower body is still pretty lean. I feel like in the past, and I build a lot of muscle there. I feel like in the past, like I've held quite a bit more body fat there. So like a lot of times that first like 10 pounds, I felt like my like upper body didn't change much at all. It was just like more stuff coming off my lower body. But I'm cautiously optimistic that won't be the case this time. And I mean, regardless, I'm pretty confident that my physique's going to look a lot different. But I'm interested to see what it's like about 10 to 15 pounds down here.
Mm-hmm. Have you noticed, so you've done different styles of dieting with different coaches and everything. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed any difference in like body fat distribution or how that comes off, or is it all pretty similar?
It's hard to say because it's been so long since I've done I haven't dieted in so long, I feel like, and my body composition is so much different. Like I did my photo shoot prep with Brandon in 2022, towards the end of 2022. I feel like since the last time I like linearly dieted, which would have been of like when I last worked with Steve back in like 2020 actually. I just have so much more muscle now. I feel like I don't have a very good, I don't feel like I have a very good comparison. So it'll be cool to go through this actually and see. And that's obviously like, it's different than how we approach things. I really like typically with clients would use a calorie cycling approach, but also I fully trust like his approach. Steve has gotten himself more shredded than I've ever gotten. So fully trust and it will be cool to kind of compare and contrast and like see what differences I notice or like how he kind of manipulates things through that process. But it's hard for me to say because it's been so long.
But it is neat that it's cool that you're doing it in a linear approach because you can go, okay, well, whenever I did this with Brandon, I did more calorie cycling. We know kind of the pros and cons, but just with going through it, okay, which one of these made this more manageable? Which one got better results? Like you can really be able to use that with your clients.
Yeah, I kind of like the fact that we're doing it differently than I would do it for myself. Mm-hmm. Cool. Anything else then before we get into the episode?
No, let's do it.
All right, Coach Andy, talk us through what is a peak week? What are we trying to accomplish here? And how does this help us get a better result for the photo shoot?
A peak week is just the last few finer details for your physique before you do, in this case, a photo shoot. So we're not making like a night and day difference here. You have to be lean enough to be able to to get the peaked physique that you want. But this is just where we're manipulating things like carbs, sodium, water, training intensity, all of those type of things to make sure that on that day you look the absolute best that you can with where you're at currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, it's, again, just that final week before the photo shoot where a few variables we're messing with to, hey, can we drop a little bit of inflammation to make your physique look a little bit tighter, right? Like, what's the ideal combination of these things to like have your muscles looking the most full without our belly looking distended and things of that nature, right? It's really how do we, like, for the photo shoot specifically, how do I bring the best look to that? Because everyone will have experience, like, man, there might be a day where I go into the gym and I just like can't get a good pump. I don't look how I want to. And there's days where like, oh wow, my physique looks incredible. Now, as you said, I think one of the biggest things to understand there is like, how much of a difference does this really make? Not that much, honestly. Like, if you're not already very lean, it really won't do all that much for you, right? Like, we can't negate the fact that we just like haven't dieted very well by just, okay, we did like this magical peak week. It's definitely not that. Similarly, if you already, it's really like, hey, if the person is lean enough, regardless, we'll get a really, really good result for this. It is more so, again, just, hey, are there a few things we can tweak to get like a 5% better look, for example, versus what we might have before? Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And really, the leaner you are, the more difference this can make. But regardless, I think that you can get too crazy with it. And if you're trying to do too much, you can actually just make things worse instead of better. So
what are the main variables we're manipulating in a peak week?
One of the variables is going to be food volume. So, and that comes down to just food selection and eating the things that you know digest really well. So usually by this point, somebody's pretty hungry. And so their food volume might be high. Lots of veggies, lots of like leaner protein sources that are larger in volume than maybe what you would eat in a maintenance phase. And so we want to go into the photo shoot with like our midsection tight, flat, and normally by the end, I mean, you can, anybody who, even not dieting, but anybody listening would know, like, okay, whenever I wake up in the morning, my stomach is pretty flat. And then at the end of the day, it's not. And assuming like digestion is still good and all of that, that's just normal. Like, there's food is sitting inside your GI at that point. But whenever we're going into the shoot, we want to keep that as minimal as possible. So using things like rice cakes or rice cereal, honey, whey protein isolate, things like that that just aren't going to take up a bunch of space in your stomach will make sure that you can still keep your core in nice and tight. So that's food selection. We're going to a lot of times be manipulating carbohydrates, and we'll talk about how we'll do that, but carbs fill out the muscle. Like, carbs are stored in the muscle as glycogen. And so a muscle that's full of glycogen is going to look bigger than a muscle that's flat and doesn't have enough glycogen in it. And same thing goes with water and sodium. Carbs, the glycogen is stored within the muscle, but those draw water along with them and help give that more full look. And, anytime there's sodium present, water will follow that. And so if we have somebody that's really, really lean, we can manipulate those three things together, carbs, water, and sodium, to get more of that water inside the muscle cell, which is going to make their muscles look bigger, but it's also going to push out against the skin and make you look leaner. And then when it comes to, you talked about inflammation. When it comes to inflammation, we just want to have lower stress on the body for a bit. So, if you get if you do a really hard leg day, your legs will kind of look a little bit swollen, and like that day and the next day, especially if you're sore, that's inflammation, because there's a healing process that your legs in that case need to go through. And so if we reduce the training intensity, a lot of times, almost always training volume as well, and bring down any cardio that somebody's doing, then that inflammation comes down and we don't hold that water where it's not supposed to be, like underneath the skin where it's going to make you look a little bit softer.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd add there?
Do you like adjust stimulant intake at all?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't really mess with it. Do you?
Not necessarily. Maybe if someone's like doing yohimbe, we might pull it back a bit. But what about cardio?
Cardio, so that goes along with training and just bringing down inflammation and bringing down fatigue. So if somebody's doing quite a bit of cardio, and we pull that back, we might see that drop in inflammation. Hang on, somebody's getting ready to ring my door.
That's completely okay. I got it from here. You can mute yourself there. But yeah, I mean, from a cardio perspective, it'll really on my end depend on how lean someone is. Where typically if someone is quite a bit leaner, I'm going to want to pull cardio at least the last half of the peak week. Not uncommon to do like 2 cardio sessions to start out the peak week. Then the last half, I'm going to pull that out to, again, just really focus on dropping stress, dropping inflammation. Now, on the flip side, if that person isn't as lean, really we might not be manipulating that many variables of the peak week at all. And their cardio, I might actually just keep in place. And like, hey, we're not going to drive that much inflammation from the cardio. Training, would still probably pull back. But the cardio side of things might just keep in place, and cool. We're just really focusing on driving fat loss more than anything else. That's our number one goal here. Okay, cool. So past that, can you talk us through the 1 to 2 most common styles of peaking you'll use with clients? Really, there are a lot of different ways to approach this, but just like a high level overview of like what a week might look like here.
Yeah, so to me, I would say the 2 different ways I would come at this would be if somebody is really, really lean and they have gotten lean enough that it makes sense to do this, then I would load with some carbohydrates and keep sodium a little bit higher, and that's going to help them fill out and make them look leaner. Whereas if somebody isn't quite as lean as we need them to be, then we're going to reduce carbohydrates and reduce sodium. So, for example, Meredith, she got shredded for her photo shoot. What we did for her was, I guess you would call it front loading carbohydrates, where about 3 days, 4 days out, we added more carbohydrates in through those sources that are going to digest really well. So for her, she used things like rice cakes and rice. And then from there, it tapers off as we get closer to the photo shoot. So because your muscles are going to hold on to that glycogen, because we're not working on like burning through that any longer at this stage. And so we're adding them in. Let's say we bump up to, we'll say 200 grams of carbs, and then pull that back as we get closer so that there's not so much food sitting in the GI system. So maybe we go 200, 150, 80. And that's where we go into the photo shoot, because that's not fewer enough after that initial load to lose that fullness. But now 80 grams of carbs in the stomach is not going to create as much distension as 200. Right. Alongside that, I'm also just kind of keeping sodium pretty steady throughout that week. I haven't messed with it too much in most cases in this type of style. So maybe we do like an 1/8 of a teaspoon or 1/4 of a teaspoon on each meal, depending on what they've been doing, and we'll just kind of hold it there where we know that they look and feel best, and that's going to help them get a pump too on their peak, on their photo shoot. And then the other style, hopefully Patricia doesn't mind me calling her out on this, but going into her show, we wanted her a little bit leaner than where she was. So we actually pulled her sodium all the way out and pulled carbs down. And when you have a little bit more body fat, if you were to load carbs and load sodium, it doesn't have the same effect as when you're shredded. It makes you look softer. So we pulled carbs down to basically trace carbs. She was mostly just eating protein and veggies and some berries, and added no salt. Like, okay, we're pulling out your hot sauce. We're not adding any sodium to any of your food. And we just kept that low all the way into it. And she ended up looking way, way leaner over those last weeks, but especially that final week, with us being really extreme with that pull down.
Okay. So you pulled sodium down quite a bit. Water, did that just stay constant, or?
Okay, so with water, if you have sodium in the diet and you're keeping your water consistent, that's again gonna kind of pull that into the muscle. If you pull the water amount down, then and you're pulling your sodium down, then it doesn't have that same impact to help fill out the muscle, and it doesn't help flush out that additional sodium. So for her, we kept her water fairly high up until the day before. I had her cut her water in half, and then the day of the show, it was just sips of water. Okay. So we're not completely dehydrating her I guess we are kind of dehydrating her because of the sodium aspect, but we're not completely pulling out water and saying like, okay, you need to, and you kind of hear about that sometimes with bodybuilding, like you're not allowed any water. It wasn't that at all, but it was like a half a gallon the day before the show, and then we're just going to keep it to take a sip of water here and there as you need, but we're not actually aiming for any certain amount of water because we want to keep that fairly low too, because what happens is your water intake along with that low sodium helps you keep expelling water, and then there's a delay between pulling your water intake down and that reduction of expelling water. So if we pull water down too early, then your body is like, okay, we don't have anything coming in, we need to stop getting rid of this body water. But if we wait until that day before and the day of, there's that delay and you keep peeing out a bunch of water. So you get essentially more dehydrated, in this case is what we want, as you go into it.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, right? And that's important to understand. Like you completely pulling back water, if we're, again, especially if the timing of that is off, will very likely lead to a worse look, because your body will sense, hey, we don't have water coming in. Your body, of course, wants to survive, so we're going to retain as much water as we can. So it can actually be counterproductive to that result people are trying to get when they're trying to quote unquote drop more water. So going through this process, through this week, what are the visual changes you're looking for with a client like Patricia or Meredith to determine if we need to make adjustments or not?
Can you say that again a little differently?
So when we're going through this process, like the peak week, what are the visual changes you're looking for to determine okay, with Meredith, I want to pull her carbs
so
down
in her
lower.
Check-in pictures.
Yeah, just in her physique.
Yeah. So with Meredith, part of the variable for her is she gets a little bit distended with food volume, more so than most people, because she has diastasis, which I do too. It's just like a separation between the middle of your abs. And if you've had babies, sometimes you just show more distension with food. Like maybe somebody that hasn't had, or maybe before babies, you eat X grams of food and you're just totally flat. Post babies, because there's that laxity there, it shows more. Even if it's not technically bloat, it's just the food sitting in your GI. So that was one of the variables with her. And so we actually kind of practiced this ahead of time to see, okay, what's going to fill your muscles out the most and keep you looking the leanest, but also how can we keep your stomach as flat as possible? And so we played around with things like her whey protein was causing a little bit of bloat, and so we changed that out to something different. The veggies that she had in her breakfast beforehand was a little bit too much volume, and we pulled that down. So we're looking at, okay, once we introduce these whatever variables, carbs, water, salt, and take pictures. And I'll have them take pictures pre-workout and post-workout because the pump makes a difference there. So did we look fuller and leaner after this change, or did we look softer, more distended, anything like that? So I'm looking at lines in the quads quite a bit. I'm looking at separation in the glutes, like the side of the glute and the glute med is a spot to really be able to tell quite a bit. I'm looking at the abs, of course, and then a lot of the separation in the upper back is a good tell for how things are filling out, and then the cap of somebody's delts. And so if we look and see, okay, delts look more capped and full, there's more separation in the upper back, midsection still looks nice and tight, that was a positive change, and we want to repeat that again. If they don't look more full through the shoulders or the glutes or quads or anything, and maybe they look a little bit distended or softer, then that was either too much or that specific food isn't something that is going to work well for them.
Okay. That makes complete sense. And it's really, largely it's just getting a lot of progress pictures from clients. Sometimes this is something we'll trial. Like if the person is already pretty lean, we might the last like couple weeks before the shoot be trialing like, okay, we do a refeed, send me pictures over afterwards. That's really just largely getting a lot of pictures from people and analyzing them. So would you say everyone should do a peak week if they're going to be doing a photo shoot?
No, definitely not. So like I said with Patricia's, it wasn't even necessarily a standard peak week. It was more like we're even more than a week out, just pulling these things down in order to continue to look leaner into it. So if we would have loaded her with carbs, she wouldn't have looked as lean as she did, and it would have made her look worse. So if I was just taking some like standard protocol and applying that across the board, some people are going to look better and some people are going to look worse. So it really just depends on how lean the person got, how much muscle mass they have, and just sort of like where they're coming from with their food going into it.
Yeah. Really, if you're not that lean yet, the best thing you can do is just keep getting you leaner by actually dieting, right? Where a lot of times here, we might not be in a deficit the entirety of the week. And this is oftentimes goes hand in hand with someone who's not like getting closer to stage lean, where if it is someone who I think it's just going to be a huge psychological stressor for them to take on all these additional variables, even for the plan to change, we might not want to. It might just be like, hey, maybe we're going to just pull back your training a bit, chill there, just focus on recovery, and everything else is going to be the same. Because that I think...
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I thought you were switching subjects.
Yeah, because I really think that this mental stress, and that is, again, something that can have a much larger impact on how someone's physique looks for the shoot. So oftentimes... for individuals who are as lean, that's the biggest thing I'm looking at is like mentally what's going to allow them to be the best throughout this week, because that's oftentimes what's going to lead us to the best look.
Mm-hmm. No, I was going to say you can tell too from we're almost always going to have high days in here and there up to this point, and you can tell based on those high days previous, how does this person respond both physique-wise and mentally.
Yeah.
Because there are some times where it's like, okay, every time we have a high day, even though our weight weekly is trending down, you get stressed because the weight is up the next day. If that's the case, we don't want that leading into the photo shoot, because that's only going to add more to that mental stress you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does our nutrition strategy the day of the photo shoot typically look like?
So the day of the photo shoot, you're done losing fat and you're done building muscle. So all we're trying to do is get a pump and keep your stomach flat. So we don't even really need protein. I'll usually add like just a little bit of protein through usually some whey isolate, because it digests really, really well, unless we've assessed that doesn't work for somebody beforehand. But really things like rice cakes, honey, with some salt on it for most people, banana, things like that are low volume, give you some carbs, and will help you get a pump when you go into the photo shoot are the things that I rely on in this case. And hopefully, I mean, I've had people do their photo shoots first thing in the morning, and I've had people do them like in the afternoon. In the afternoon kind of sucks because then you're just really hungry going into it.
Morning, yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully you get 1 or 2 meals beforehand, but ideally not more than that if you can schedule it well.
Yeah. And really just trying to keep the food volume low, as you're saying, so that, again, there's not distension or anything of the sort. And really, like, one of the few times where I'll pull protein back quite a bit as well, just because it can, again, like, we're trying to keep the total volume low. It can be a little bit more, depending on the protein source. Like, if someone was eating, like, a lot of dairy, for example, okay, this could cause potentially a little bit more bloating, a little bit more distension. And again, as a whole, it just makes sense for us to really try to keep the food volume, the total volume in your GI tract low. But it's not drastically different from a water intake. Are you just typically like, hey, just drink your water as you feel like, or how are you typically structuring that?
The day of, I'm typically just saying take some sips here and there as you need to. Like whenever you're thirsty, take a little bit of a sip of water, because water does take up a big space in your stomach too, and can make you feel more bloated and full. So, or not bloated, but just full. I mean, we're not peaking open bodybuilders here. So the exact amount of water doesn't make a huge difference in the outcome. And so I'm not typically playing with an exact amount on the photo shoot day. It's like, okay, we don't want to be guzzling water and make you feel full because of that. But you also don't need to be like not starving, but whatever you would say for water, and like spitting into a cup to expel as much water as possible either. Okay,
fair enough. So in the last, let's say 30 to 60 minutes before the shoot, to get the best pump, which will of course lead to our muscles looking more full, is there anything that you're doing really the last like hour from the shoot to the shoot time to help clients, like any last details we're adjusting there, anything else you're having clients do there to get the best look?
So we'll usually do a bit of carbohydrates beforehand to get some glycogen, and also to get a bit of an insulin spike, because insulin helps to drive the nutrients to the muscle cell. And so having that is helpful. Having that little bit of water that they're sipping on is helpful again to bring more nutrients to the muscle. And then sometimes I'll use like some sort of pump product, like a non-stimulant pre-workout type of a thing. It's not like a make or break kind of thing. I don't think that those make a huge difference. It's mostly going to be the water, salt, and sodium. But we'll do that usually about 30-45 minutes beforehand. And then doing about 15 minutes of a pump up routine whenever you get there helps fill out your muscles. And I will focus on the delts and the glutes usually. Sometimes like the upper back or lats. I'm not usually that concerned about the chest because we're usually peaking women. I guess if I haven't done a photo shoot for a guy yet, but if we were, I would definitely focus a lot more on chest there. Yeah. Stay away from the quads. Quads don't look better when they're pumped unless you're like an open bodybuilder, stage lean type physique. Quads usually just look softer if you get a pump. So, delts, glutes, any of the muscles that you really want to kind of showcase will get a pump there. Yeah,
I definitely, as you said, quads, we bring a lot of blood and water to your quads. They will oftentimes, unless you're, just crazy lean, they won't look better. You'll kind of blur the detail we can see and like the separation in the muscle. Same is true for the back to a degree. So typically I don't have people do like a whole lot of back specific work either with this pump up routine. But again, we're basically just trying to get the best pump we can. So there, it'll typically just be something like 2 to 4 rounds. We're going to start this like 15, 20 minutes before your shoot actually starts, where we're doing movements that are going to be very conducive to a pump. It'll just be a circuit style fashion typically. Now here, like challenging a muscle in the shorter position, so like in the contracted position and in a higher rep range, will typically be more conducive to a better pump. So for example, like we said we wouldn't use quads, but like if you wanted a better quad pump, you would probably do leg extensions, which are going to bias the short position more, versus a hack squat, which is going to bias the lengthened position more. So it might be something like, hey, maybe we're going to do like, I'll oftentimes even program like 1.5 reps where we're doing like the top half of the range. We're doing like all the way up, halfway back down, back up, all the way back down. And that is going to, again, just give us a little bit more time, like an extra contraction in that shortened range as well, to just help drive a bit better pump. But it might be something like a circuit of like, maybe we're doing like a machine press or a push-up, a lateral raise, a bicep curl, a tricep extension. But as you said, I'm really typically pretty heavily focused on like delts, biceps, triceps, glutes. And then, yeah, if it's a male client, pecs as well. If it's a male client, pecs are actually like the biggest thing we want to focus on. Anything else to add there?
No.
Okay. So we got a couple questions then on kind of what the day looks like. Basically, how do you get in front of camera, feel comfortable, etc. So kind of just wanted to talk through what the shoot actually looks like and organization prior. No matter what, unless you're someone who's extremely comfortable in front of camera, I know I'm definitely not. I'm a big overthinker. I always reassure my clients, if I can do this, I'm like the most awkward person in the world, you can do it too, right? So take comfort in that, if nothing else. But really, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like doing anything else. It's kind of like jumping in a cold plunge or something, where like it's more so like the anticipation before it. And then when you're in there, it's like, okay, I'm just doing it. You don't really think about it that much. But I always recommend people prior to this, create a swipe file, like screenshot a bunch of, go on Instagram, Pinterest, wherever, and just screenshot a bunch of pictures that you like from like other photo shoots and things of that nature that people have done. So you kind of have like a swipe file of, okay, like this pose might be cool. I like this shot here. And can kind of even give your photographer, I would share this with your photographer, and give them ideas of kind of the look that you're going for here as well. I will put together several different outfit combinations you want to wear. Don't just like, if you're going to do it, I typically think it makes most sense, unless this is truly like a, hey, I'm never going to show anyone any of these. But since we work with a lot of coaches who are doing this, and a lot of times they're using this as marketing material, content, it makes sense to have a good amount of different outfit combinations. So I'll plan those prior. And then, for example, Natalie's client, Jen, shout out to our girl, Jen Millardo, just crushed their photo shoot. It was super cool because she did her photo shoot here in Phoenix, and I actually got to be there at the gym. And we got to meet like a couple times at the gym prior. And then actually like got to the gym about an hour before her shoot, and we actually put together, okay, you have these different outfits, and here is like kind of what we're thinking are the different like poses and movements we want to capture, right? So we had a list of different movements. Then we had, okay, well, you have like this top that really like showcases your back. Your back looks great in this, right? So we're gonna so we even put together like, okay, we're gonna do your pull up. So I put together for her, like, okay, here's when you're wearing this outfit, here's the movements we're going to do. When we're wearing this outfit, here's the movements we're going to do, etc. That works so well because we could actually just like take the photographer through all that. That was really, really fun. Because typically it'll only be like 30 minutes, which may seem like a long time, but it just goes so quickly. And honestly, you have to be pretty on top of it. But that said, like, you don't need to overthink the actual shoot too much. Like your photographer will be used to, everyone else is the same, unless you are like that rare person who's just like loves being on a camera and this is like the most comfortable thing in the world for you. Understand that like 95% of the people that they work with are like this, whereas like, oh man, what do I like do with my face right now, right? So they'll be able to coach you pretty well through like, I don't know, hey, just look at this or do whatever. Really, like in the case of a fitness photo shoot, all you really have to do is lift, and they'll take a lot of pictures of you. They'll like take a ton of different angles. They'll kind of instruct you for where the best lighting is. Or again, it was cool, Jen, where I could be like, hey, the best lighting is over here for this, right? Just because I know we did it at Fit Lab, which I know so well. But really, you just have to lift. and they'll take thousands of shots of you and they'll pick out the best ones. So you don't really have to think too much about it, or like I'm trying to hit like my blue steel pose here or anything of the sort. I find for just showing off how jacked and shredded you are, typically a few of the best like movements to get on camera, hanging leg raises are a really good one, like hanging from the bar, doing like a leg raise, ab crunch, really showcases your abs, also lats, back. Pull-ups for your back are also a really good one. A standing dumbbell bicep curl is actually one that always looks great for some reason. Like people's delts, like the side delts really pop during that. That's always a really good shot. Honestly, I would say like any lateral raises, bicep curls, lower body. Yeah, what's that?
Dumbbell row.
Yeah, dumbbell row really gets the back well. If you're like a male, like a cable fly is a really good one, like in that contracted position. Lower body, leg extensions are a good one. Past that, like just like your lunges, split squats can look kind of cool. There aren't really like, I think your lower body just kind of comes through better, honestly, more so just like as a side effect of like what we see at the upper versus like this specific movement makes this pop more.
Or even just also, like standing under the bar, like unwrapping the bar with some weight on it. Your quads will flex and it makes your upper body look good too.
If you've practiced posing at all, like a lot of times that can actually, like like hitting a couple of poses can actually show them a lot better than like any specific movement. If you're a coach, you can also get some lifestyle and coaching related content. Like if you're using this for marketing. So for example, I've done, like I'm fully clothed and I'm working on a laptop, right? Or first one I did, I was eating a Chipotle burrito, or I brought a bottle of wine with me. Our messaging and like how we approach things has really changed since then. But yeah, anything else you would like to add on the shoot day?
Also, if you're a coach, kind of like taking somebody else through a movement can look good. Like you're coaching through a movement. Yeah. That's really the only one I can think of that you didn't say. I think you covered all that really well.
Yeah. Really, like if you're coaching, I would and Instagram isn't as much like this anymore. I feel like for a long time, everyone was like doing photo shoots where they were like doing a lot more like lifestyle stuff, or like here's me talking on the phone, or here's me working on my laptop, etc. And not as much a thing anymore. Just like a
headshot is probably a good one too.
Yeah, I get a good professional headshot. I do like that. But past that, as far as listener questions we had, I think we answered most of them. One we did have was types of non-fitness photo shoots to show off body composition, poses, and etc. What is I can always mess up this word, boudoir, right?
Boudoir.
I've had a couple clients. This isn't one where I'm like, hey, here's your poses or anything like that. I will leave that to you, and that's quite a bit different in that, again, like I'm not involved at all in like actual shoot, but here's kind of how we go about that. That's one I've had a couple clients do. Yeah. Do you have any good answers past that though? I can't give like good poses on that. That's not something I've personally done yet.
Yeah, that's the only one. I had somebody that did just sort of like her in her house as a coach, just you know, like cooking something, like she was a little bit more clothed. She had like a tank top and leggings, but it was more like lifestyle like that. Meredith had some cool ones, just kind of like standing out by some water, where it wasn't like in the gym. She was just sort of standing there, arms crossed. Those looked cool. Yeah. But that's all I've got.
I did a couple with my truck last time. I thought those were cool.
What?
I'm just kidding. I don't have a truck. I'm just kidding. Sorry, never mind. Past that, though, that's really all I have for you guys. Do you have anything else you want to add here before we wrap it up?
No.
Cool. All right. Well, as always, hope this is helpful. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Happy New Year, everyone. If you enjoy the show, do us a huge favor. Leave us a 5-star rating or a review. It just helps us reach more people with the show. And finally, if you would like to work with our team, if you want someone to guide you one-on-one through this photo shoot process, we've done this with tons of clients. We'd love to help. Just click the link in the show notes to apply. And we will catch you all next time.